now that the Cold War is over?
There are two trains running on very different tracks here. Back in November, the President ordered the newly installed Director of Central Intelligence, Bob Gates, to conduct a sweeping review of the intelligence community, which is the CIA and 11 other huge agencies, in the wake of the Cold War. Gates organized many task forces. Congress then leapt in with its own proposals for reorganization. And what we have here is really a titanic struggle behind closed doors over money and power in this realm of secret intelligence.
How do you think it's going to shake out, let's say, in the next 2 years?
I think it'll take a decade before the import of the end of the Cold War is really felt in American intelligence. We have a huge, sprawling, and disorganized intelligence community which has grown up kind of helter-skelter over the last 45 years. And with the disappearance of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, its central mission has disappeared. It is in search of missions at a time when its costs, which is more than $30 billion a year, and its secrecy, all that money is spent in secret, are under attack from Congress.
What are the pressures that avoid the obvious conclusion that if the enemy's gone, you don't need quite such an infrastructure? What's keeping it alive?
Well, the world is still a dangerous place, or so the nation's policymakers believe, and the threats that they define, international terrorism, the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, drug trafficking, economic threats to the nation. All these threats existed before the Soviet Union collapsed and still exist. They are in search of missions, and those are some of the missions they are in search of.
Our phone lines are open, and we'll go to the phones in a few more minutes after we learn more from Tim Weiner about national security issues. He has been with the Philadelphia Inquirer since 1982, here in Washington as the chief correspondent since 1989. He's been writing on the CIA and related matters for 5 years. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1988 for national reporting for his coverage of the black budget and the secret Pentagon budget. He's been to Afghanistan with anti-government rebels to report on the CIA support of the rebels. He's a graduate of Columbia University and with a BA and a master's in journalism. Welcome, Mr. Weiner.
Thanks.
Your colleague in the Philadelphia Inquirer writes today, Ruth Sinai, Gates says CIA to focus on economic espionage. Is this what you're talking about in terms of search for mission? And what is he talking about in terms of economic?
Ruth, incidentally, works for the Associated Press. She's a great reporter. The threat to the United States, as defined by the CIA now, has many heads like Hydra. Cut one off, two appear. And an untraditional threat is now emerging in their eyes, and that is the economic welfare of the United States. The President, Gates says, has demanded economic intelligence on our allies, such as Japan, such as the European community, and our old enemies, such as the former Soviet Union. This is an example of a post-Cold War threat. Now, how a secret intelligence agency does a better job of gathering what is, after all, open information about the world's economies is an interesting question. Why is the CIA best suited to do this and not the Commerce Department? That's the kind of question that is under review right now.
What is your sense about the support within these agencies for reform? Are they simply following orders, or do they, in their heart of hearts, like the status quo?
Well, it is very hard for a huge secret bureaucracy to reinvent itself. Take as a model the Pentagon, which is going through similar agonies. Now, most of the nation's intelligence agencies are within the Pentagon, and we see the struggle to preserve money and prestige and power taking place there. The questions are so large and these agencies are so immense that the hope for quick reform by the passage of legislation, I think, is small.
Nevertheless, there are at least two proposals, one in the House, one in the Senate. Senator David Boren and David McCurdy, they're both the respective Intelligence Committee chairs. What's their particular approach?
There are three kinds of raw intelligence. There is human intelligence, which is gathered by spies. There is signals intelligence, that's electronic eavesdropping on telephones and telecommunications. And there's imagery intelligence, that is photographs taken by spy satellites. In the jargon, it's HUMINT, SIGINT, and IMINT. They would organize along those lines, create a huge national imagery agency that would collate all the information gathered by our many, many spy satellites and electronic eavesdropping stations. A huge sort of national think tank separately that would analyze all this information. And then over here, kind of in a corner, would be the CIA, which would be running covert operations and running spies. Their proposals have been met with respectful derision by the executive branch. The president has ignored them largely. And Gates has, the director of Central Intelligence, has put forth his own proposals, which are sort of fine-tuning. They don't create any new agencies. They don't really abolish any old agencies. What Gates is trying to do in terms of reform is reform the internal culture of the Central Intelligence Agency to make it less secretive, to get these agencies, which keep secrets from each other after all, to talk to one another so that they can perform more efficiently.
Let's go to the phones. Tampa, Florida is first. Go ahead, please.
How you doing?
Hi.
Good morning.
Oh, pretty good. Seems like these secrets that they keep in the Pentagon and all the other places, look like they're trying to keep the United States people in the dark all the time. I don't understand it, you know. And we paying for all this stuff. And just like, you know, just had Congressman Hamilton on there. You know, look like he's only after stuff that he's really looking for, because the guy asked him earlier about the Noriega situation. Hey, you know, he got dumbfounded all of a sudden. You know, that don't seem right.
Well, you are absolutely right. You're paying for it, and you're paying large, because intelligence costs this country more than $30 billion a year. That's nearly $100 million a day, and that budget is secret. Now, our Constitution demands an open public budget. This secret budget process was created during the Cold War, and Congress has moved to open up, or at least publish, that bottom line number, which is still classified. Some intelligence agencies, their existence is still kept secret. And again, there's a sense that after the Cold War we can open up this process. But the secret budget part is something that's under attack in Congress.
Well, we asked Congressman Hamilton about your Morton Halpin quote here, and I said, if you march down with a subpoena from the Intelligence Committee demanding to see a document, what do you think would happen? He suggested that maybe there's some questions you don't want answered. What do you think would happen? Morton Halpin seems to think that Congress has the right to all of this information. Congress
has the power to divulge the size of the intelligence budget, the full structure of the intelligence community. There's a lot that Congress doesn't know, a lot. And the intelligence oversight committees have a spotty record in policing the intelligence community. If they don't know what to ask for, they don't know how to ask the right questions, they often don't get a proper answer.
Do you believe Congress has the right to know?
Not only does Congress have the right to know, the American people under the Constitution have a right to know how their money's being spent.
Do you think they'll get that right to know, or they'll be able to effectuate that right?
Not in the near future.
The 10 years is what you're talking about? Denver, Colorado.
Classified information is controlled by the Council for Foreign Relations, and Snowcroft is a member of the Council for Foreign Relations, and he programs Bush every day at what to say, what to do, and it's getting to a point where these foundations, like the Rockefeller Foundation, the DuPont Foundation, the Ford Foundation, control everything that takes place in this country. They control the CIA, the FBI, the judges, the Congress, and they are the mafia. So you see what they did to the mafia before election now and put them all in jail? this is a really for the element of people who really don't know what's going on in this country. If we really knew what was going on.
Well, hold on, caller. We want to get a little colloquy here. I'm sure you saw it. Tim Weiner was shaking his head at everything you were saying. So why don't you stay on the line, Tim Weiner?
Yeah, I think that conspiracy theories, like the one the caller voiced, that there's a secret commission that's controlling everything, arise because of the secrecy that does surround the intelligence community. Now, the Council of Foreign Relations is a bunch of old guys sitting around, talking about foreign affairs. They're not the secret Wizard of Oz pulling the levers of the American government. But the kind of secrecy that does surround what, after all, are largely innocuous bureaucracies cause this kind of conspiracy theories to rise. And they are evergreen theories, and they will continue to thrive so long as excessive secrecy surrounds our government.
Caller, what do you think?
I readily disagree with the gentleman. He's a very bright young man, but they're so horrified of being maybe put away and done in like Kennedy was done in, that he wouldn't dare say anything against the Rockefeller Foundation. They are so powerful that the people in this country really don't know actually what's really taking place, and this is scary.
Well, caller, how do you come by your information?
Well, I've had friends that have been in the CIA, and I've gotten information that that tells me this, and everybody that you speak to, the councilmen, the senators, the judges, whoever you talk to, everybody puts it aside. One politician once said to me, "How many people do you really think know about this?" And it's scary to think that this is going on in this country, which is the greatest, most magnificent country in the world. And I really feel for my children and my grandchildren. I'm 65 years of age, and believe me, I have enough to support myself. I'm really worried about the future generation in this country.
All right, sir, thank you. Denver, Colorado. Anything to add? I guess not.
Okay.
Encino, California. Go ahead.
Hello. Hi, Mr. Weiner.
Good morning.
This is Russell Ani. I live in Encino, California, and I agree with everything that the last caller said, and then some more. And I can tell you do. You just have to keep a cap on it, so to speak, and I understand that. But there's a book, have you heard of it, called CIA, A Forgotten History?
Yes, I've read it.
Isn't it excellent?
Very well done.
If people realize what the CIA has really done and what it's really about, I think they'd be shocked. And I think this country, it's the way I would parallel it is it's like an incest situation where the mother pretends like she doesn't know what's going on, but she really does. Because I find it hard to believe that this country's that naive.
Well, I think that there is a danger of having secret agencies in an open democracy. It's very hard to reconcile the two. And the argument that's going on in Congress, that's going on in Washington right now, is do we need to have totally secret agencies? Can't we open this up a little? Can't we relax a little bit now that the state of emergency feeling that characterized the Cold War is gone? There is excessive secrecy in the White House, in the CIA, in the Pentagon, but there's not some sort of massive conspiracy running this country. If there's one thing I've learned in 13 years of reporting, it's never attribute to conspiracy what you can chalk up to stupidity. Stupidity is a much more powerful force in human events.
Westmoreland County, PA. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Fine, thank you.
And good morning to your guest. I agree with what he's been saying.
Good morning, sir.
Stupidity is the root of all evil, along with greed, of course. That takes first place. I wanted to say something to Brent Scowcroft a few minutes ago, but I couldn't get on for 45 minutes. Here's secrecy in government, including the house banking ripoff. I keep hearing our politicians tell me that there is no tax monies lost in this deal. I have to laugh at these people. I mean, I'm not a mathematician, but I say if I put my money in the bank for 200 years, my God, I'm going to have a heck of a lot of interest. The United States Treasury bankrolled that bank in the very beginning. I want to know where the money is that was put in that bank in the beginning. I want to know where the interest is that should have been compounded on that money. I mean, who are they kidding?
Okay, sir, thank you.
I have to pass on that. I'm really not an expert on the house bank scandal.
Robert Gates testified before the House and Senate committees several weeks ago. What was his message to them?
On April 1, Gates testified in a very rare open session of both the joint session of the Senate and House Intelligence Committees. And what Gates called for was really evolutionary changes in revolutionary times. He's given the bruising, bloody battle it took to get him appointed to Director of Central Intelligence, where his honesty and integrity were openly questioned by some CIA veterans. Gates is very interested in reforming the internal culture of the CIA, and he wants less secrecy within the CIA very much. One of these task forces he appointed essentially said, we've got to talk to each other here. I'll quote from his speech. Compartmentation and secrecy, so essential to the effectiveness of an intelligence service, over the years have inhibited the flow of information to CIA employees about decisions being considered by senior managers, and often what those decisions are once made. Same problem in the larger intelligence community, where different agencies won't share intelligence, won't share technology, won't work with each other. So Gates is trying to essentially create a kinder, gentler CIA inside the CIA. He's also tried to give the appearance of being more open by making more speeches, by appointing an openness task force. Unfortunately, the openness task force's report is still classified secret, so we don't know what it says.
Congressman Hamilton referred to that in his op-ed piece that appeared in yesterday's Washington Post. Did you hear his presentation this morning?
Just the tail end.
He is calling for the elimination of the confidential level of classification and also a wholesale reform of that system. What's your view of that, and what do you think Robert Gates's view is toward that proposal for reform?
There are so many classified documents in this country that the custodian of the secrecy system doesn't know how many there are. I once interviewed him on this. He said, billions, tens of billions, trillions? Who knows? It's a big mountain. Almost everything of value, every analysis, every report is stamped secret, top secret, or higher than top secret. That has to change. It really must. And Gates has said, fine, we'll start to declassify documents that are more than 30 years old. Well, they're required to do that anyway. The danger, of course, is that you get into a situation that happened last year. There's an official government compilation of all government documents related to foreign policy. It's called the Foreign Relations of the United States. It's been published continuously throughout the history of this republic. They're 38 years behind in declassification. When they finally got to the year 1953, the report does not make any mention whatsoever of the U.S. role in the overthrow of the Prime Minister of Iran and the installation of the Shah. That's because CIA wouldn't declassify documents relating to its role in that coup. Now, the head of the Historical Commission that compiles these reports resigned in protest, saying, you're falsifying history by virtue of classification. We can't get into a situation like this, not in America.
San Diego, California, go ahead.
First off, I think the statement is never attributed to stupidity, that which can be adequately explained by malice when you're dealing with government. Second is, I think the Council on Foreign Relations does have a role that it plays, and I agree with the gentleman. There's no one grand conspiracy, and the slick response to that is that there is no one grand conspiracy, but there are a lot of little conspiracies of people who have power who want to maintain it. You know, we have children missing in this country just like there are children missing in Central and South America. We have a lot of problems. I agree that we need to declassify certain documents, and I agree we need to examine the process. But, you know, a lot of the stuff that happened in the Gulf happened as a result of black funding, technologies that were applied, and I think that there is a balance that has to be made. But at the same time, the wholesale, when you go in even when you explain what's going on at lower levels in intelligence operations, you lay out a pattern of how you function, and that I think is what everybody's more afraid of than necessarily the information. You see, the gentleman's focusing on the information. It's not the information. It's how it's gathered. It's how the operation's conducted. It's how you function and you survive. That's where this gentleman's wrong. And I agree. There's a lot of money out there being wasted.
All right, sir. Thanks.
The great danger that the intelligence agencies and the Pentagon always say, that is, say we tell them what the bottom line of the budget is. Say we actually say, all right, it's $31 billion a year. They're just going to want more, they meaning us, of course, the press and the public. I think that we really went too far in the direction of excessive secrecy in this country in the 1980s. We wound up with secret foreign policies like selling weapons to Iran. We wound up with enormous secret compartments within the executive branch that committed crimes. And we really have to sort of pull back in this tug of war and guard against excessive secrecy. I'm not arguing that people should divulge secret technologies that this country is working on. I'm not arguing that they should divulge sources and methods. Hey, I'm a reporter. I don't divulge my sources sometimes either. And I find it very hard to argue against gathering intelligence, since that's what I try to do myself. But when it comes to the costs of these programs, and when it comes to the existence of huge agencies, that's where I draw the line.
What kinds of things are classified as confidential?
Confidential is the lowest level of classification, and it could be anything from a memo from me to you if I worked in the State Department and you worked down the hall from me. It's really anything that the writer wants kept away from a potential auditor.
Is there a standard that potential classifier has to follow in order to name it confidential?
The gradations are confidential would tend to cause possibly some damage to national security. The gradations would be confidential, secret, top secret. Confidential would cause some damage to national security. Secret would cause serious damage. Top secret would cause grave damage.
Is there anything higher than top secret?
There are thousands of so-called compartments, code word compartments. A code word is like a passkey to get into the compartment. And there are thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of code word compartments that are classified above top secret.
Anniston, Alabama.
I have a question about Iran-Contra. Now, during Iran-Contra, McFarland, Poindexter, and Secord were all indicted for violating the Boland Amendment. Now, when Ronald Reagan testified, he was allowed to invoke the clause of plausible deniability. I would just like you to elaborate upon this so-called legal precedent of plausible deniability, how the executive was not responsible or claimed total ignorance of the activity of his subordinates. As you recall, during Watergate, it was never proved that Richard Nixon had any knowledge or was aware or approved of the Watergate operation, but he had to resign under the threat of impeachment as orchestrated by Peter Rodino and Judge John Sirica. I would like you just to comment on why is it that the CIA, I personally believe the whole thing was a setup and a frame.
All right, what's your question?
That all these people, McFarland, Poindexter, and Secord, were entrapped by...
Carr, do you have a question about this?
Well,
You want to know about plausible deniability?
I think the mob trapped all these people, and and just comment on this plausible deniability.
Okay, we got it. Thank you.
Plausible deniability is a classic mode of intelligence where you disguise the approval of the executive, the president, the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. In the old world, that is, in the old world of the Cold War, secret operations of Central Intelligence Agency were constructed in such a way so that the role of the United States could be plausibly denied. That is, you couldn't see our hand in a coup abroad. Now, this was supposed to all have changed in 1980 by the creation of a law called calling for the president to sign an order called a finding, where the president finds that a secret operation is necessary for national security. In Iran-Contra, of course, this law was violated because secret operations were conducted without the presidential signature on the bottom line. And we're now trying to sort of fix that slightly broken system.
You know, recently there was a memorandum that came out of the Defense Department that suggested a role for the United States in the future, the so-called superpower, or the single
That's right.
superpower. What's the story behind that memorandum, it becoming leaked or becoming available, and what do you know to be the reaction of the intelligence community to that approach?
Well, you have to understand that the intelligence community is 85% within the Pentagon, that the National Security Agency, the biggest intelligence agency in the country, is a Pentagon agency that conducts electronic eavesdropping. The National Reconnaissance Office, which operates spy satellites, again, hidden within the Air Force. So that when you speak of the Pentagon creating a scenario for the future, they are working hand in glove with the intelligence community. There's a fairly seamless web there. Now, this guidance that was created within the Pentagon that envisioned the United States as sort of the sole superpower of the world and policing the planet was ginned up partly to justify the continuation of a very large defense budget, and also legitimately to envision everything that could possibly happen, everything that could go wrong all over the globe for the next 5 years. There is a similar dynamic going on here where the Pentagon is searching for missions. Okay, Cold War is over, threat of nuclear war has evaporated. Who's left as the bad guy in the world scene? Well, let's see, there's North Korea, there's Cuba, maybe China, not really, Albania. I mean, the list is not long. In the good old, bad old days of the Cold War, where you had one great superpower facing us with tens of thousands of nuclear weapons aimed right here at Washington and every other strategic capital across the country, and you really didn't have a lot of trouble justifying a large defense budget. The same search for missions, the same search for roles is going on in the intelligence community. Where is the enemy? What is our job now? What are the real threats to national security? And for that matter, what is national security now that the Cold War is over?
How did that document become public?
Well, it's funny. I mean, Colin Powell and Dick Cheney were talking about the substance of that document for weeks before it was published in sort of, look what we found fashion by the New York Times. What happened was that somebody got a hold of a draft of this guidance, this document, that was stamped secret, disagreed with what it said, disagreed with this sort of cop of the globe approach, leaked it to Pat Tyler at the Times, and a leak is just, here, take this, read this. And Pat read it and said, pretty interesting, put it in the paper. But the sum and substance of it was really available in the public speeches of Cheney and Powell in the weeks during this winter.
Quarter hour to go with Tim Weiner, Cape May, New Jersey. Next.
Tim, this is Bruce, the ex-Cape May taxi driver.
Hey, how are you?
All right, how you doing?
Not bad.
We miss you down here. You're the kind of journalist that renews a lot of our faith in the power of the truthful press. Can you comment on what kind of effects you think your series on the B-1 had on that issue, on that controversy?
On the B-2, the stealth bomber, right. I don't think that it had any huge effect on it. I mean, the B-2, which I think we should explain to viewers what it is, that's not the stealth fighter that flew in the Gulf. That is that great sort of Batmobile.
We're showing a picture of it right
now. Nuclear bomber. Here's a status report on the B-2. We've spent $32 billion on this plane. 3 have been built. When all the costs are in, and 15 or 16 roll off the production lines, we will have spent more than $2 billion a copy on a nuclear bomber that most likely will never fly in anger. And the secrecy that surrounded this so-called black, that is super secret program, for 10 years prohibited public discussion of its costs or its capabilities. And you wake up one fine day in the morning and you've got a $2 billion bomber on your hands. That is serious money. you could have built that plane, which weighs 70 tons, out of solid gold and have more than $1 billion left over in change.
The KGB is also disintegrating. What intelligence benefits, if any, are we getting from that development?
Well, I mean, the great problem for the CIA and for the nation's military intelligence agencies now is the tremendous flood of open information that's flowing out of the Soviet Union. I mean, for decades, we knew almost nothing about this closed, secretive police state that was our mortal enemy. And one fine day in the morning, we wake up, and there is a torrent, an avalanche of information flowing. We don't have enough people in our intelligence services who speak Russian, much less Uzbekistan or Turkic. And we can't know what's going on in these tremendously crucial, vital republics unless we have people who speak the language. I mean, if I'm sent abroad as a foreign correspondent, I need to know a little bit of the language. So I warrant would a CIA officer stationed in Azerbaijan. They're having so much trouble dealing with this information that it's sort of like a mixed blessing.
Lake Oswego, Oregon. Go ahead.
Yes. I spent over 12 years in Europe from 1950 onwards. And the role of the CIA and all intelligence agencies seems to be missed by everybody. Don't you feel that the business of America and the Western world is business, and our relations and what we do, like you talk about the Shah of Iran and his overthrow, if this was the Shah of Pakistan and we needed nothing from Pakistan, we wouldn't get involved in this. The whole thing with the Cold War was dead in 1950. Russia had an army and nothing else. I really don't know how to put this thing to you, but it's a question of the financial interests of the West, the financial interests of the United States. We'll take a thing like today with our commercial war with Japan. We dropped the discount rate to save the Japanese stock market. We're not at war insofar as building bombers and what have you, but our central intelligence agencies and our intelligence agencies have to provide certain information to the country so our system financially can survive, therefore our country can survive. Right.
Central question of the post-Cold War world. What do we do instead of gear up for war with the Soviet Union? The fear is that we didn't win the Cold War. Japan won the Cold War, and Germany won the Cold War, because while we were spending trillions of dollars gearing up for war, they were forbidden to have standing armies, and they built an army of capital instead. The search for economic intelligence that the President has commanded the CIA to undertake is a very interesting opening shot in what will be a, I think, frantic search by the intelligence community, rather by the CIA, for a deeper understanding of the global economic forces that affect us. And that's what we'll be doing, that's what they in the CIA will be doing a lot more of these days, rather than counting nuclear warheads in the Soviet Union.
Daytona Beach, Florida, go ahead. Daytona Beach, you're on the air. Daytona Beach?
Yeah, hello?
Yeah, go ahead, you're on the air.
Yeah, I'd like to first congratulate Mr. Weiner and his newspaper for the series that they ran, America What Went Wrong, by two of his colleagues, Bartlett and Steele.
Thanks.
Second, I'd like to give a little view of what the articles were about. It was a detailed account of what happened in the last two administrations, you know, Reagan and Bush, what they did to our country economically. And third, I'd like to tell the viewers that, excuse me, I'm a little nervous, it's going to be on tonight at 11 o'clock Eastern Time on PBS. And third, I'd like to have his view on it. Thank you.
Right. Two of my colleagues, Don Bartlett and Jim Steele, who are, for my money, the best reporters in America, published a series that was as long as a book, and in fact it's just been published as a book, called America What Went Wrong. My paper ran it at great length, and I think to its credit. This was a thorough and easy to understand, frankly, analysis of how the rich got richer and the poor got poorer in the 1980s, and I recommend it to anybody who cares about this country. It's available for a very low price in paperback, just out this week.
Monroe, Louisiana, next.
Yes, sir, about that B-2 bomber that you was talking about.
Yes, sir.
About the cost of it. If they'd have finished doing it in the 1950s, we would have had the technology advanced 100 years. Thank you.
Well, that may be true. I can't say.
Well, you've talked about a 10-year turnaround. What can you suggest? What kinds of changes we'll see within the 10 years, and what the likely endpoint will be?
If I knew that, I would be testifying to Congress right now, or I'd be hired as a consultant or something. Look, we have a huge intelligence complex in this country that was geared up for one main purpose, which was to protect and defend against a sneak attack with nuclear weapons by the Soviet Union. As that threat vanishes, this complex has to search for new missions, for new threats, to justify its existence and justify its budget. I think that there will be a long struggle to redefine what national security means today. For 50 years, it's been nukes and spooks, nuclear weapons, covert operations. That won't work anymore. National security, I think, is freedom from danger and fear. And we have ecological threats to this country. We have economic threats to this country. We've got all manner of internal problems. The CIA was not set up, and nor were its sister intelligence agencies, to deal with these domestic issues. My sense of things is that in time, the money, the intelligence, the energy, the human vigor that have been devoted to these agencies will be shifted to attack our domestic problems. I think that will take a lot of time, and it will take a total rethinking of the meaning of national security in this country.
Los Angeles, California, go ahead.
Well, I agree with your description of why it was set up originally, the CIA.
Caller, are you on a speakerphone?
Yes, I am.
Could you pick up the receiver, please?
Sorry about that. I agree with your reasoning on how the CIA and why it was set up, but I think shortly thereafter, as money is the milk of the political scene, as they would say, they put their people in the positions that they wanted, and they used the CIA to carry out covert missions for their economic benefit. Do you agree with that? And also, I'd like to say, I think that if you have any information on the Middle East situation, the war was set up way before it even occurred. We invited him in. We also talked the Kuwaiti consulate into upping their pumping volume 10% above the OPEC agreement, and also told them to renege on their loan guarantee to Iraq for fighting the war with Iran for 8 years.
Thank you, sir.
Well, in the bad old days, in the 1950s, for example, there were many, many instances of governments being overthrown. Essentially, take Guatemala. We helped overthrow the government of Guatemala in 1954, and one of the main interests that was defended down there was the United Fruit Company, which is based in Boston. There are other examples of that running through the history of the CIA. But it is an oversimplification to see the CIA as an arm of American capital. It's not that simple. The national security interests of this country are not merely economic. And the CIA has served presidents' whims and presidents' desires and presidents' goals, not necessarily the goals of American finance capital.
You mentioned your colleague's book. I should mention yours. You've got a paperback book out called Blank Check, published not that long ago, this year, by Warner Books. What's it about?
Blank Check is about the so-called black budget of the United States. That is the $36 billion a year cash of money that funds all secret operations, all secret intelligence, and all secret weapons in this country. And it is sort of a tour of the horizon of this Cold War phenomenon, and it is a description of some of its secret compartments.
When was it published?
First published a year and a half ago, now in paperback.
Ah, okay, so the paperback version is out now. All right, so it should be in the bookstores.
Yes, sir.
Amesbury, Massachusetts. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning, C-SPAN.
Morning.
I want to thank you for commercial-free television.
You're welcome.
A first-time call. I'm a little nervous here, but I'd just like your guest to comment, if he could, on the quality of the intelligence community that we've been paying for all these years. You know, they weren't able to predict the fall of communism in Europe. They were way off on the collapse of the Soviet Union. To get into the Secret Service a little bit, you know, they have done a very poor job, I think, in protecting our elected officials. If the guy yesterday had a gun, he probably would have blown Reagan away.
Okay, sir, if you want an answer, we've got only less than 90 seconds.
Right. Secret Service is separate from the secret agencies of this country, just incidentally. The quality of the analysis that CIA provides, both to policymakers and to the military, has been widely criticized in recent months. It's been described as a mush, a pudding, and not of the first order. Not as good as something you could get out of a think tank like the Rand Corporation, or maybe out of a graduate department of a university. One of the great challenges that faces Bob Gates is convincing the best college students in this country to go to work for the CIA. I don't think he can do it. The money's not that good, and the struggle up the bureaucracy is tough. But finding out what goes on in this world is a fiendishly difficult task. This country does need intelligence. I would never argue against that. I mean, my job is going out and finding out information. A lot of what they do is the same thing, and I have no quarrel with that. But not when, for example, the CIA could report, as it did 6 years ago, that people were better off in East Germany than they were in West Germany. That's a true story. It's totally wrong. It's laughable in retrospect, but that's how sort of screwy CIA analysis got towards the end of the Cold War.
We're out of time. Tim Weiner, Washington correspondent for the Philadelphia Inquirer and author of a book now out in paperback called Blank Check. Thanks for being here this morning.
My pleasure.
And our audience, thanks for watching. Thanks for your calls. Have a good day.